Swart.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Marsden. Just a number of issues. The meeting on the 11th of April, obviously you wouldn't have been at that board meeting but that was the concern that you set out in your letter to the Hawks, that prepayment didn't come to where it should have come. But that meeting, in terms of the Public Protector's report, which you have had sight of, those board members would have known that the prepayment was actually to buy shares and not for any pre-production requirement for OCM, which would have been the normal business practice. And that was a finding of the Public Protector. In all probabilities, would you tend to agree with that, although you don't have personal knowledge, but that given the fact that those board members were fully involved with the background of OCM, with the financial implications, and now suddenly they've been asked to approve a prepayment for pre-production mining, which is the normal thing, but whilst they know that it's actually not that, it is in fact to buy the shares. And that is the reason why you also filed that complaint with the Hawks.
Once again, I have no knowledge of that meeting. I'm not even sure who was present or attended. I don't know if it's a board or a subcommittee. So I certainly don't know what knowledge they would have had around the transaction, when it was closing, what was due and payable. Unfortunately, I'd love to help. I just don't have any knowledge.
I do understand that. But obviously you've been very involved in this whole process. You're negotiating with the boards. You know what is in their knowledge. You know. And so I'm not asking you to speculate, but to me it's very clear that they would have known at that stage, and that is a finding of the Public Protector. But let's just leave it at that. What I also want to pick up, and this is, you see, you've also got to think outside of purely being a business rescue practitioner, of what is in the public domain at that time as well. When you come in, you're looking at the whole history of Optimum mines, you're looking at Glencore, and now we know subsequently that there have been, whilst you were also the business rescue practitioner, you were appointed in August of 2015, and in September of 2015, or in August of 2015, you might not have known it there, but Mr. Molefe and Mr. Ngubane are alleged to have met with the then Minister, Mr. Ramatlodi, to suspend all Glencore's mining licenses. A massive, again, the implication for me is that there is pressure from Eskom against Glencore. That he refuses to do. The minister is then fired, and a new minister is put into position, a new minister that we now know is more Gupta aligned. And in the time that you, the business rescue, which you would now have knowledge, you might not have had knowledge of Mr. Minister Ramatlodi, but in September, the new mines minister applies Section 54 stoppages at all the Glencore mines, including Optimum, which is the one under business rescue. So you should have been aware of that, and was it a concern of yours? Why is this additional political pressure now on Optimum Mine from outside? Please.
Thank you very much. Once again, I can't comment around Glencore mines, but certainly within the Optimum coal mine, we did receive a stoppage notice. It wasn't a 54, I think it was a 92, right at the start of the business rescue process. So literally within 2 or 3 days of being appointed. That stoppage related to a technical infringement, and we were able to get the stoppage uplifted within a couple of days. Certainly heard all the stories around pressure being exerted on Glencore. Once again, not within my personal knowledge, unable to comment on it.
And we also know that Tegeta started to get involved, and they were doing small mining activities. Brackfontein and those mining activities increased, and there was a problem with their quality. Would have that been any bearing with your involvement with Tegeta, their history with Eskom as well, and the fact that some of their stockpiles were rejected? Did you have knowledge of those Tegeta mines prior to this whole engagement? Let me just be more specific. Whilst you were a business rescue practitioner, you're approached by Tegeta. You know that Tegeta is already involved with Eskom and other mines, and there have been problems with those mines. Was that an issue?
Certainly came into our consideration. I think that we took really a couple of things out of it. First of all, I think Optimum had an excellent management team in place and would operate under our control, so they certainly would not have any ability to influence that. The second aspect was important to us in terms of they were an existing Eskom customer, and we thought that as a result of that, Eskom would have knowledge of them, so to the extent we brought a transaction, they would at least be an approved vendor, if I can use that terminology.
So we are aware that there's political involvement. We're also aware, in terms of the Public Protector's report, of Mr Molefe meeting with the Guptas. Now, that might not have been in your knowledge at that stage, but was it not strange to you why the negotiations on the coal service agreement that seemed to be proceeding well, and when Mr Molefe comes in, it suddenly stopped? And there's suddenly this acrimonious attitude with a company that's had a long-term contract of 25 years, and as suddenly you, as in business rescue, did you not find this strange in your, and again tying up with pressure that we know the Public Protector has said that the conduct of the Eskom board was solely to benefit of Tegeta in awarding contracts to them?
So I certainly think we walked into a pretty difficult hornet's nest in terms of the relationships. Obviously no commentary around the prior engagement and knowledge, but certainly it became quite apparent to us and quite clear that a transaction that involved a simple reshuffling of the contract with Glencore as a shareholder was unlikely to meet approval of Eskom. I think that the hard stance that the executive of Eskom took at the point was, at the time, something that certainly could stand up to commercial muster. I mean, somebody pushing back against Glencore is unusual. Somebody insisting on enforcing in a contract that in the short term would have been to the benefit of Eskom to get coal at the short-term supply. The manoeuvring of Eskom to have the good and the bad part of the business included in the transaction made commercial rationale to us. Somebody was playing hardball, and I don't think that there's an issue with that. In fact, I think it probably had some commercial sense to it. I think where the picture starts to get a little bit more murky is post the facts that have come out post the event.
If I understand you correctly, that the negotiations were done and there was commercial sense to that, but why would it then be necessary to have a meeting in Switzerland with the Minister of Mining? You obviously don't have knowledge about that. Mining, the Guptas, and Glencore, to almost put, and a minister acting in that capacity, which is unheard of, if it was commercially sound. Why would that be necessary at all?
So I think it had some commercial sense from Eskom's point of view, is kind of why I dictated those items. Correct, I don't know what happened in Switzerland. I certainly know that an offer that was capable of being concluded arrived relatively shortly after that meeting. I'm not sure what a minister's portfolio is meant to be. It does appear to be unusual, but I don't have a lot of knowledge of that particular meeting.
Well, it's again political interference in this issue, which is very clear. Can I just ask you, what I'm trying to understand is, you've got OCM is in dire straits. There's a penalty added, which actually puts them straight into business rescue, the 2.1 billion. But had that negotiation taken place on the hardship agreement continued, and had that penalty been settled, and then we now subsequently know that the loss-making contract was for the supply of Hendrina, and we now know that the Hendrina power station was reduced, and in fact the OCM coal sold to Tegeta went to Arnot at a radically increased price. Had you had that option, surely even prior to business rescue there would have been no reason for business rescue at all.
I think that option was tabled prior to business rescue, in terms of effectively switching some of the export product to the supply to Arnot. Once again, I think we were looking for any options from Eskom, and in the first 60 days, as I detailed at the start, we made a number of different proposals to Eskom in terms of the continued supply of product to Hendrina. And once again, going to the prepayment issue, the coal that was supplied via Tegeta to Arnot came from the Optimum coal mine. So certainly that would have been an option that was available, but we were not able to conclude any of those.
But that is what is happening at the moment, as we now know subsequently. So that is how the Tegeta / Oak Bay / Guptas have managed to change a loss-making mine into a profitable mine by moving the coal, which was what you proposed at the beginning, which wasn't accepted. So it seems it's very clear why the Public Protector came out with her damning findings that Eskom did not act in the best interests in terms of various provisions of the Public Finance Management Act as a public company as well. And we know the cost of coal has in fact escalated significantly. So, Chair, I just wanted to point out one other thing, and that is the Pembani deal. That contract is referred to in the Public Protector's report as well, and there was an issue there that during the negotiations, according to the Public Protector, it related to the consideration of the penalty and the consideration of the coal supply agreement. Exactly the same terms that Tegeta got to look at that. But I think that the distinction that you make is that they were only looking at the one element and not the whole total. So it seems very clear to me that this whole deal was structured both from a political perspective and from an Eskom perspective to make sure that Tegeta received the benefit and received the mines at the end of the day, and then as soon as they got the mines, to then make sure that OCM was a profit-making company. Would you be in agreement with that?
I think that's the conclusion that the Public Protector came to.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.